Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's well. This is just a follow-up, really. Yesterday, I posted a freedom of information request, and it was about the Scottish number of COVID-19 deaths, etc. Well, here you have the Scottish National Health Minister, who wanted to stop the freedom of information during COVID-19. Now, I'm just going to read the article out for you, so if you bear with me. Scotland's Health Secretary wanted to suspend freedoms of information legislation in response to the coronavirus pandemic. According to internal government emails obtained by the Ferret, and the Ferret is the article that I'm reading from, Jane Freeman, MSP, made the request as the government was preparing emergency legislation in response to COVID-19. In response to a request for ministers to suggest items they felt were urgently required. Commenting on the Ferret revelation, opposition politicians have accused Freeman of wanting the public to be kept completely in the dark over issues such as care home deaths and of promoting secrecy and spin. In an email sent on behalf of the Cabinet Secretary, she requested the suspension of freedom of information legislation in order to allow staff, national health and local government, but potential to extend more widely to focus on essential activities. Her suggestions went further than proposals already developed by the FOI unit, which was involved giving public bodies significantly more time to respond to requests. The emergency legislation passed on the 1st of April extending deadlines for public bodies to respond to FOI requests. From 20 to 60 working days in some circumstances, the Scottish Government could extend deadlines for bodies other than itself for another 40 working days. However, MPS rejected the proposals in May following an outcry, forcing the Scottish Government to withdraw emergency relaxations. Responding to Freeman's suggestion on the 23rd of March, Penny Curtis, the Scottish Government's head of elections and FOI division, laid out two options. The first would see ministers stick with that we're proposing, which was a blanket extension of freedom of information deadlines while the legislation remained in force. This was described as proportionate but not overreaching or removing people's rights. The second option was to accept the suggestion of a blanket suspension of the freedom of information Scotland Act 2002 for a COVID-19 period. Curtis wrote that this approach was simple, offers certainty for public authorities, might be proportionate in response to level of emergencies, but she also warned that the changes might be too far-reaching to gain the necessary support in Parliament. However, in a document produced by the FOI unit on 19th of March, the blanket suspension of freedom information duties was described as substantial violation of ministers' commitment to openness and transparency. Officials warned that such a move would face significant criticism from the public, opposition, MSPs and the Scottish Information Commissioner. The document also explored alternative options for relaxing duties to comply with freedom of information laws. It's ultimately argued that the blanket extension of the response deadlines to 60 working days, trebling the original period, was only feasible option to relax the requirements of the FOI Scottish authorities in the short term. Officials also pointed out, however, that Scottish Information Commissioner did not believe such a move was necessary, and that they were not persuaded that restrictions to freedom of information rights should be an immediate priority. The emails were revealed after a freedom of information request by the Ferret, which was returned more than 6 months later. A number of high-profile health stories in recent months have used FOI requests, including a BBC disclosure investigation entitled The Care Home Scandal, which was broadcast on the 28th of July. In August 2020, information obtained through the FOI was revealed that hospitals in several parts of Scotland discharged patients to care homes despite them having tested positive for COVID-19. Now, it basically goes on talking about the to and froing of the FOI. She added the duty to provocate disclosure and respond to information requests promptly is undermined when staffing levels are reduced. There is no leadership or robust compliance. We call on the Scottish Government to deliver the Scottish Information Commissioner recommendations to urgently improve its FOI practice to ensure the FOI unit is fully staffed. Scottish Labour MSP Neil Findlay, who has campaigned for freedom of information access, told the Ferret the Scottish Government has an appalling record on freedom of information, and this was exposed prior to the COVID-19 crisis. However, today revelations take this to a new level. When we see the Cabinet Secretary for Health requesting that the freedom of information legislation should be suspended during the COVID-19 crisis. During this crisis, what we really need is maximum transparency, not a government desperate to cover up. Sorry, I'll read that bit again because my reading's got crap. During this crisis, we actually need During this crisis, what we really need is maximum transparency, not a government despite to cover up. I need something to eat because I'm hungry. We know that Jane Freeman goes out of her way to ensure that information on things like care homes, deaths and treatments of older people is kept secret, but it appears that she wanted the public to be kept completely in the dark during the crisis. What we really need is a maximum transparency, not a government desperate to cover up. The Scottish Conservative health spokesman Donald Cameron MSP accused the Scottish Government of being more interested in secrecy and spin than being straight with the Scottish public. The Scottish National Party government's attempt to use coronavirus emergency legislation as a means to undermine Scotland's freedom of information law was shabby and cynical, even by their standards, and rightly met with cross-party opposition in Parliament. It's no surprise to now discover the Health Secretary wanted to actually suspend the freedom of information. After all, it was only thanks to the FOI that the public found out about the decision to send known COVID patients from hospital into care homes. The Scottish Government spokesman said clearly the primary focus, as people would expect, was on the frontline responses to the pandemic and helping save lives. A suggestion was made to allow staff to focus on their essential activities. Ministers determined the temporary provisions would provide much needed breathing space for authorities to respond. The Commissioner was not opposed to legislative change, and our Stage 2 amendments reflect his suggestions for safeguards to protect information rights. We have been transparent throughout this pandemic and will continue to be going forward. Freedom of information documents. Okay, right, so I'll leave a link to this document, to this article that I've just read. And yeah, this was the horrible woman who wanted everything to be secret. Again, you know, wake up. The government doesn't work for you. It really doesn't care. Thanks for watching. Share, like, subscribe and all that malarkey. Yeah, and don't forget, check your subscription because you may be unsubscribed. Your notification bells because YouTube's really messing around now. Well, I have been for a while. Anyway, have a wonderful day. Speak soon.